theater.
Good evening, I'm Jim Lara. On the NewsHour tonight, the news of this Friday. Then what happened today in the presidential campaign, the analysis of Mark Shields and David Brooks, a final big picture report from New Mexico, this one on voting irregularities, followed by a national look at that voting situation. Plus, another update report from John Merrill on the troubled New Orleans schools, and a Richard Rodriguez essay on the changing American dream.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer is provided by
oil, energy, the environment. Where are the answers? This isn't a liberal or conservative issue. It's a human issue. As an energy company, Chevron has a great responsibility. So we've improved our own energy efficiency 27% since 1992. And now we ask you to join us in one of the most important efforts of our time. Using less. Will you join us? Chevron Human Energy.
Pacific Life. Vestas. Grant Thornton.
The William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, working to solve social and environmental problems at home and around the world.
And with the ongoing support of these institutions and foundations. And
this program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Wall Street finished a furious week of highs and lows. The Dow Jones Industrial Average swung back and forth nearly 600 points today. It ended with a loss of 127 points to close at 88.52. The NASDAQ fell 6 points to close at 17.11. For the week, the NASDAQ rose more than 3.5%. The Dow gained 4.5% after a series of wild gyrations. The index was up more than 900 points on Monday, then down more than 700 on Wednesday, and back up again by 400 yesterday. Overseas markets rallied today as major indexes gained in both Europe and Asia. President Bush insisted today the financial rescue plan will pay off. He spoke this morning just before the U.S. markets opened. The president defended the government's move to buy up stakes in banks as a last resort. Now he said Americans must have patience.
The actions will take more time to have their full impact. It took a while for the credit system to freeze up. It's going to take a while for the credit system to thaw. These are decisive measures aimed at the heart of our financial challenges. And they're big enough and bold enough to work. And the American people can be confident that they will.
There were small signs of hope today for the credit market. A key interbank lending rate fell for the fifth day in a row. And in today's New York Times, billionaire Warren Buffett said he's buying stocks, and he urged others to follow suit. He wrote, "Fears regarding the long-term prosperity of the nation's many sound companies make no sense." The presidential candidates traded charges today over health care. Democrat Barack Obama claimed Republican John McCain would cut Medicare to finance his health care plan. McCain's campaign charged Obama with simply lying. It insisted McCain won't cut a single benefit. We'll have more on the campaign right after this news summary. The U.S. Supreme Court today rejected a complaint in Ohio over voter registration. The state Republican Party demanded a better system to verify who's eligible. The state's top elections official, a Democrat, said it was really a bid to disenfranchise voters. The court ruled the federal law in question does not allow suits by political parties. The State Department confirmed today North Korea has resumed dismantling its main nuclear facility. Work at the site began again after the U.S. took North Korea off a list of states that sponsor terror. Spokesman Sean McCormick said U.S. officials on the ground have described the progress.
All the seals are back on, the surveillance equipment is back reinstalled, and the equipment that had been removed is back where it had been. So in addition to that, they have moved removed more rods from the reactor.
McCormick acknowledged North Korea still has work to do on dismantling factories that handle nuclear fuel. The Prime Minister of Iraq lashed out today at the top U.S. commander there. Army General Ray Odierno had said Iran may be bribing Iraqi lawmakers to oppose a security agreement with the U.S. Today, Prime Minister al-Maliki shot back that Odierno has risked his position and complicated U.S. relations with Iraq. The draft security pact is now before Maliki's cabinet. Alaska Senator Ted Stevens testified today he always pays his own bills. The veteran Republican took the witness stand for a second day at his federal corruption trial in Washington. He again denied accepting $250,000 in home remodeling for free. The senator said he'd tried to oversee the renovations, but his senatorial duties often got in the way. Drug maker Pfizer announced a settlement of nearly $900 million today over two painkillers. The agreement will end thousands of lawsuits targeting Celebrex and Bextra. They claim the drugs caused heart attacks and strokes. Pfizer pulled Bextra from the market in late 2005. Celebrex is still being sold. And that's it for the news summary tonight. Now, out there on the presidential campaign, Shields and Brooks, voting challenges in New Mexico and elsewhere, a New Orleans schools update, and a Richard Rodriguez essay. What the candidates were up to today, Ray Suarez has our report.
Democratic nominee Barack Obama returned to Virginia today, trying to build on recent polls that show him ahead in a state that hasn't supported a Democrat for president in more than 40 years.
I'm pretty sure that America's ready for change. I'm sure Virginia's ready for change.
Speaking in Roanoke, Obama focused on health care. He said John McCain would pay for his health care plan by cutting funding for Medicare.
$882 billion in Medicare cuts to pay for an ill-conceived, badly thought-through health care plan that won't provide more health care to people, even though Medicare is already facing a looming shortfall. If you count on Medicare, it would mean fewer places to get care and less freedom to choose your own doctor. You'll pay more for your drugs. You'll receive fewer services. You'll get lower quality care. I don't think that's right.
Obama said as president, he would improve Medicare coverage.
We can strengthen Medicare by eliminating wasteful subsidies to big HMOs in Medicare, making sure seniors can access home-based care, letting Medicare negotiate with drug companies for cheaper prices on their drugs. That's the kind of change we need.
Obama's running mate, Joe Biden, also campaigned today in a state that voted for President Bush in 2004, New Mexico.
I love John talking about, well, you know, Barack Obama wants to redistribute income. Let me talk about redistribution, ladies and gentlemen. The fact of the matter is the biggest redistribution of wealth has taken place under George Bush. Wall Street Journal, not Joe Biden, points out, not since 1921 has this existed. Right now, the top 1% of the American people make over 22% of all the income in America. 1%. The bottom 50, they make less than 13%. Ladies and gentlemen, that's redistribution the wrong way. Let's set the record straight. Let's help the middle class.
Republican candidates John McCain and Sarah Palin brought their economic message to the traditional battleground states of Florida and Ohio, both won by President Bush in 2004.
There's no doubt whatsoever we will win the state of Florida.
In Miami, McCain again hammered Obama's tax plan.
Then Obama claims that he wants to give a tax break to the middle class, but not only did he vote for higher taxes on the middle class in the Senate, his plan gives away your tax dollars to those that don't pay taxes. That's not a tax cut. That's welfare. America didn't become the greatest nation on earth by redistributing the wealth. We became the greatest nation by creating new wealth.
And McCain said it was Obama who would put health care out of reach for millions of Americans.
By I'm elected president, I won't fine small businesses and families with children, as Senator Obama proposes, to force them into a huge new government-run health care program while he keeps the cost of the fine a secret until he hits you with it. I'll bring down the skyrocketing cost of health care with competition and choice to lower your premiums and make it more available to Americans.
In Westchester, Ohio, Sarah Palin told the crowd a McCain-Palin administration would cut the federal deficit.
As president, John will impose a spending freeze to cover all but the most vital functions of government, those that would include worker training and taking care of our veterans. We must balance the budget. We'll balance the budget by the end of our first term. He's got the guts to confront the $10 trillion debt that the federal government has run up. That debt that we're expected to pass on to our kids and our grandkids. No, that's not right. That's not fair. That will not happen on our watch.
Today's events were a stark contrast to the more genteel setting last night at the Alfred E. Smith Dinner for Charity in New York. The candidates left the campaign trail to poke fun at each other and themselves.
It's true that this morning I've dismissed my entire team of senior advisors. All of their positions will now be held by a man named Joe the Plumber.
Glad to say tonight's venue isn't really what I'm used to. I was originally told we'd be able to move this outdoors to Yankee Stadium. Can somebody tell me what happened to the Greek columns that I requested?
The candidates will keep up their torrid pace this weekend with appearances in several hotly contested states. North Carolina, where the race has tightened in recent weeks, will get visits from both nominees. McCain will be in Concord on Saturday, and Obama is set to appear in Fayetteville on Sunday.
And to the analysis of Shields and Brooks, syndicated columnist Mark Shields, New York Times columnist David Brooks. Mark, the candidates remain very much on the attack, but it's about issues now, is it not?
It is on issues. Barack Obama is very heavy on health care, going on issues that he feels do work for Democrats, no question about it, and work for him. John McCain going on taxes, which has been the strong suit for the Republicans.
David, Obama has said from the beginning that he sees health care as part of the overall economic issue. Do you agree with that as a principle?
Well, I guess if you include the economic issue as uncertainty, it is true when you go out on the campaign trail, health care has been sometimes every other question, especially early in the year, the last couple months. Mm-hmm. But and then people see it, I think, especially in the middle-class people everybody's going for, as part of the uncertainty of the times. Now, I must say, I mean, the two issues they're talking about are issues they could have been talking about 6 months ago. Yeah. And they're very safe issues for each of them. I'm not sure either have really adapted to the issues of last month.
The financial
and right, and that's a tough
economic
issue. And it seems to me both of them are tested by it. Say the health care thing. I mean, Barack Obama's health care plan, which cost a lot of money, even accepting his cost savings, which are dubious. Is he going to still have such an ambitious health care plan given the new fiscal reality? It seems to me that's the crucial question that Democrats are debating. They're almost debating the governing decisions he's going to have to make. Do you blow a hole through the deficit because of the recession, or do you pay attention to the deficit and try to restrain spending?
And in fairness to Obama, the corporate argument that's made that the United States business, to be competitive internationally, that there has to be the burden that is now shouldered by American corporations for health care of their workers under contracts, that has to be, if that burden could be lifted by a national health plan, that they feel the American economy, the American corporations will be more competitive internationally.
Mark, let me ask you this. The conventional wisdom and the polls show that when it comes to the economic issue, the fiscal crisis, the financial crisis, whatever, John McCain does not do well on this. He doesn't do, in fact, it's costing him tremendously in the polls. Mm-hmm. Why? Why is it that he's not seen as a leader of these kinds of issues?
Well, I think, Jim, first of all, it's never been John McCain's strong suit. Second, he's carrying the brand of the Republican Party, which is blamed by most voters for the condition of the economy right now. I mean, Tom Davis, a very prominent and respected Republican member from Virginia, said if we were a dog brand, if Republicans were a dog brand, it would be removed from the grocery store shelves. I mean, it had fallen so in such discredit. And I think John McCain himself has no particular strength in that, by his own admission. And I guess the third thing is that John McCain's own performance in the time of the financial crisis, when the spotlight was on, suspending his campaign, coming back, and did not. He talked about a steady hand at the tiller, but he did not project that to voters.
Demonstrate. You agree with that, Dave?
Yeah, especially that final point. I don't think Barack Obama knows all that much about the financial world and credit default swaps more than John McCain does. But in a time of stock market volatility, you probably don't want presidential volatility. And that's partly the decisions McCain has made over the past couple of weeks. Partly it's just their nature. Obama is a relatively, in fact, remarkably unvolatile personality. And McCain, especially in the debate performances, has been wound tightly. And you showed a bit in the earlier in the show about the Al Smith dinner. Mm-hmm. And when I watched the McCain performance, the whole performance is really worth watching on YouTube or wherever. It's the old McCain. Mm-hmm. It's the McCain enjoying himself. It's the McCain relaxed, gracious toward Obama, very funny, very personable. And when you saw the debate performance and then you saw that Al Smith dinner performance, you're reminded that he doesn't seem to be enjoying himself. He seems to have a different personality from himself and sort of the attacked personality which he feels constrained to put on. And you wonder, why is there such a big difference between these two performances? And I think it's the campaign has surrounded him with a series of arguments and a posture that's not really him. And someone, after this is all over, is going to have to figure that all out.
What do you think accounts for it, Mark?
I think
Do you agree, first of all, there's two John McCain?
Oh, I do. I mean, the John McCain at the Al Smith dinner was winning and wonderful, and more than even the lines he delivered, such as, I have a pet name for Senator Obama, I call him that one. He has a pet name for me, he calls me George Bush. I mean, which is, sort of a nice, self-deprecating line.
And he delivered every one of them like deadpan.
He delivered them well, but the key, Jim, was when Obama was delivering his lines. And Obama did quite well, too. McCain was laughing uproariously at the funny line.
As was Obama.
Yeah, Obama was, too, but I mean, it was interesting. Yeah. That was just sort of the light. I mean, for example, Mike Bloomberg, the mayor of New York, did not laugh uproariously when Obama took a needle at him for seeking a third term and trying to repeal term limits in New York, even though it was a shot at Bill Clinton as he did it. He said, when Bill Clinton found out that Bloomberg was trying to repeal term limits, Bill Clinton said, "You mean you can do that?" But I think David's right. I think that we have to remind ourselves, every campaign is inevitably a mere reflection of the candidate, the strengths and the weaknesses of the candidate. And I think we're seeing the strengths and the weaknesses of John McCain. I mean, and part of it has been the mercurial nature of his candidacy.
See, I wonder if that's really true in this case. I mean, people used to say it was not true of Al Gore. He didn't run his kind of campaign. John McCain I don't think of as a standard issue Republican. And yet, you look at a lot of things he's done over the last couple of weeks, the Bill Ayers thing, sort of refighting the 60s. He never cared about the 60s. And I mean, those kind of culture war fights until this campaign. He wasn't around for the 60s. He was in Vietnam. It just wasn't the thing that bubbled up naturally in him. The tax cuts. The Republicans all used tax cuts at this time in the campaign. But I'm not sure that's really what he preferred to be talking about. And I just think a decision was made early on in the process. They decided to run this as a reasonably conventional Republican race. Why they wanted to do that this year, of all possible years, is beyond me. But they can't change it now. They're down this path, and they're going to continue.
But they didn't decide. John McCain decided. John McCain. Barack Obama decided. I mean, that's the decision to make. Al Gore decided not to mention the environment. I mean, his counsel not to do it, but he decided. And I think there's something deeper here that's bothering the John McCain candidacy this time, and this working very much for Obama. And we saw it in the debates. And that is, Jim, take the presidencies of Richard Nixon and Lyndon Johnson, two of the most knowledgeable and experienced men. Both had been vice president, Senate, congressman, in both tragedies, Vietnam and Watergate. And as a consequence of their presidencies, Jimmy Carter was begat in a biblical sense. His lack of experience became a positive virtue. His no knowledge of Washington as a one-term governor of Georgia became an asset to voters.
He wasn't tainted by Washington.
He wasn't tainted, and he was honest. He said, I'm never going to lie to you. If American voters go looking for what was missing in the president who's disappointed them. George Bush has been a guy who says, I decide from the gut. He's been proudly undeliberative. He's been, almost disdainful of intellectual presentations or ideas. And this is made to order for Barack Obama. His coolness, his calmness, his confidence, his reflectiveness is really, I think, cherished by the electorate, whether it's conscious or unconscious, in 2008, because the Bush model has been found wanting.
You buy that?
Yeah, though there are ways in which McCain is opposite of Bush.
I agree.
McCain is not a party person. A lot of his friends are the Democrats. A lot of his enemies are the Republicans. That's one distinction. The second is experience. And to me, if he played on experience with safety, and I mean foreign policy safety, but also domestic safety, fiscal discipline, which is certainly in his nature, he could have played that up. He also could have played up, and this would have been riskier, but I think the right thing to do, played off Bush's confidence, super self-confidence. That is something Bush and Obama share. Extreme personal self-confidence, a feeling I can take care of the problems as they come at me, whatever comes at me. If you say, I've seen enough of the world to know how wrong I can be, which is something McCain actually does pretty well, I think he could have played off that a little sense of humility. But again, that's an atypical campaign. The normal formula is super confidence, no doubt, in the middle of a campaign.
But you buy into part of what Mark is saying is that the time also fit Barack Obama's temperament.
Yeah, in a million different ways. Not only for the issues the Democrats are down and now they're rebounding, but just for and I keep coming back to this, I was so impressed when the financial crisis hit, and Obama doesn't know all that much, but he had a wall of people behind him, the Paul Volckers, the Warren Buffetts, the Robert Rubins, the Larry Summers, the Gene Sperlings, all these people. You could trust those people. And he not only has those people standing behind him, anybody can do that, but you really get a sense from him that he would know how to talk to them and learn from them.
Yeah. I think John McCain's performance, I think you'll go back and you'll look at a couple of decisions that were made in this campaign, and obviously the economic crisis just changed the entire dynamic. But the performance of the two men during that economic crisis, I think in a strange way, McCain seemed more Bushian. He seemed more operating from the gut. And Obama did seem cool, detached, deliberative. And sometimes that might be almost, people say, I want someone who feels more, as they did in 1992 when Bill Clinton, when George W. Herbert Walker Bush didn't seem to understand the economic anxiety that voters were going through. He was too cool. He was too cool and detached. And Bill Clinton said, I feel your pain. So I think the times really do matter in that case.
Do you think? Yeah. I would just say that the risk is, and for Obama as we think forward, if he is elected, what Paulson has done and what Bernanke and Bush has done, it's a huge step. It is a bold gesture. Now, is Barack Obama the kind of guy who would make that kind of bold gesture? He is a very cautious person, and you could say, would he do that? And I think that's an open question.
How about the resistance to it? None. I mean, you bring in the 7 biggest banks, and you say, okay, sign this piece of paper. I mean,
we now own you.
If a Democrat tried to do that, they'd say, I mean, the Wall Street Journal editorial page would run an extra. This is not creeping. This is galloping socialism. It's not communism. Instead, we've had it done by the proudly conservative president from Texas, of the man of the ownership society, has just given us socializing of our national economy. It's a remarkable change.
The question is, Bush is, for better or worse, the master of the big gesture, whether it's Iraq or anything else. I'm not sure Obama has ever shown that in the history of his life.
No, other than running for president.
Right.
Oh, probably for that, yeah, which is rather a bold act for somebody with that kind of a background.
Yes. Mark, David, thank you both very much. And now the last of our week of big picture reporting from the battleground state of New Mexico. It's about the voting itself. Correspondent Gene Grant of KNME Albuquerque has the story.
80 miles west of Albuquerque, along historic Route 66, sits the tiny community of Grants, the site of a lingering electoral controversy since June. At stake was the Democratic nomination for a state Senate seat. David Ulibarri was declared the winner by just 5 votes, despite the fact that 182 ballots went missing. Clemente Sanchez lost, and he's still frustrated that even a state investigation hasn't led to the missing ballots.
The investigation that's been going on for the last month and a half, 2 months, maybe more than 2 months, and they have no idea what happened to these 182 ballots.
Sanchez says he and many of his supporters have lost faith in the system.
There were so many ballots lost that I don't know, was it mine? Was it my family's? What happened to them?
Cibola County Clerk Eileen Martinez oversaw the vote, and she's in the dark, too.
I don't know what happened to those ballots, and the Attorney General's office was here, and they investigated, and we got a letter from them that there was no misconduct or anything like that, so we don't know where those ballots went, so...
New Mexico has a history of razor-thin election margins, which means small problems have the potential to add up to larger troubles. And not just troubles over missing ballots, but counting them, too. It's taken weeks to certify elections here in recent years. Provisional ballots, ballots cast by voters whose eligibility was in question, or who went to the wrong polling place, are partly to blame because it takes a long time to verify all the information. Maggie Toulouse-Oliver is the clerk in New Mexico's most populous county, Bernalillo, which includes Albuquerque.
It's so funny, I always get asked the question, why does it take so long in New Mexico? Well, it always takes that long. Nobody's paying attention unless it's a close election. If the provisional ballots are not going to determine the outcome of the election, the process is largely ignored by the general public because the outcome has been decided.
Technical troubles with voting equipment have vexed state officials, too. In 2004, more than 20,000 ballots were cast without a vote for president, leading some to charge that touchscreen machines hadn't properly counted the votes. George W. Bush won the state by less than 6,000 votes. That led New Mexico to switch to optical scan machines that use paper ballots like many other states. Toulouse-Oliver believes that was a good decision by the state.
If there's ever a question, if there's ever a doubt about the accuracy of the system, we can go back and look at those paper ballots. We can hand count them. If a machine fails in the course of an election, a voter can still vote. They don't have to stop or wait or be turned away from the polls. So there are so many advantages to having a paper system over an electronic system.
But the return to paper ballots has come under fire, too. Republican State Representative Justine Fox-Young.
I fought really hard against the paper ballot system only because it's meant, and we knew it would mean, terribly long lines for voters on Election Day and early voting, of course, as well as, you know, a greatly increased chance losing ballots and hanky-panky with ballots during the counting process.
Fox-Young also contends that county clerks have been forced to deal exclusively with one company to service their ballot machines, resulting in high costs to maintain voting equipment.
We have not provided them with enough resources to cover that. And frankly, I don't know that the state can. The company is now basically extorting the clerks for, what they're calling mechanical updates and other services in the interim, and the clerks have no choice.
Cibola County Clerk Martinez acknowledges she doesn't have the resources to cover all the costs associated with the machines.
Do you have enough money to service these machines?
No, we don't.
The trouble with ballots and machines, they're just part of the problem here. Soon after the deadline passed to register new voters, a familiar controversy resurfaced. Questions have been raised about whether some of those registrations are fraudulent.
This year, a record number of new voters have been added to the rolls, many by so-called third-party organizations, like the Association of Community Organizations for Reform Now, known as ACORN. The group's regional director, Matthew Henderson, takes pride in the number of voters his organization has registered in closely contested states.
We shattered our previous record, a national record, registering 1.3 million people around the country, 80,000 people here in New Mexico.
But not all of those registrations have passed muster with Bernalillo County Clerk Toulouse-Oliver. Her office has flagged close to 1,500 potentially fraudulent cards.
And they have been set aside, and every attempt has been made to try to contact the ostensible voter that is on the card. And so I think that To the extent that this was attempted, it's true that the effort was to try to create fraudulent voters who would appear at the polls on Election Day. Well, those folks aren't going to have the opportunity.
Nationally, Republicans are challenging Acorn in states across the country for allegedly processing thousands of faulty registration cards. And the FBI is investigating. GOP attorney Pat Rogers worries some questionable votes will be cast.
I don't know how many, and nor do I know, nor can I tell you what the vote difference is going to be between Barack Obama and John McCain or our important federal elections. I can't tell you if those are going to be close or not. I can't tell you that there's going to be enough fraudulent votes to make a difference, but I can tell you unequivocally there are going to be fraudulent votes cast, and if it's a close election, it could impact it.
Acorn's Henderson doesn't buy that.
It's just hysteria that they're trying to stir up in order to create concern about the election. And it's a real shame because the story here is that we should be encouraging all these new voters to vote, and instead they're trying to cast a shadow on it.
Yes. This is
University of New Mexico election expert Lana Atkinson says there's no firm evidence for widespread fraud.
There's anecdotal stories, but when you chase those stories down, you often can't find strong evidence that those stories are real, or even any evidence that those stories are real.
Add to all that a perception that elections here can be quirky. Take, for example, a state law which mandates that ties be decided by a game of chance. In this case, a game of high card draw in a recent small-town mayoral race.
We have two booths right there. And
across the state, county clerks say they are doing what they can to ensure a fair election.
There's never an error-free election. All we can do is train our poll officials more intensely.
But those efforts are lost on former state Senate candidate Clemente Sanchez, who still feels stung by the process.
Do I have faith in the system at the way it's run now, at the way it's done? No. Unfortunately, I ended up being the guinea pig on this, my election, and I never would have expected anything like that. But I'm really nervous about the general election, not only the local race, but also the national race.
When it comes to November's election, one thing is certain. The closer the vote, the greater the scrutiny will be.
And New Mexico isn't the only state with potential voting problems. Judy Woodruff reports.
For a broader look at voting issues around the country, we're joined by Rick Hasson. He's a professor at the Loyola Law School in Los Angeles and an expert on election law. Professor Hasson, thanks for talking with us. What are the main voting-related problems around the country right now?
Well, there are different kinds of problems. Some of the problems relate to machines. And, since 2000, when we learned that the punch card machines were a big problem, we've switched over to other kinds of machines. And in some places, like in Palm Beach County, they're on the third set of machines in 3 major elections. And so some of it relates to rolling out new equipment. Some of it, as we just heard in that report, relates to questions over voter registration and matching databases. And some of them is just misinformation about who's entitled to vote and what the procedures are going to be on Election Day.
Are the problems mainly concentrated in the battleground states where we expect the vote to be the closest?
Well, I think that certainly the most attention nationally has been paid there, but there are problems in all over the country. I think we know that there'll be some problems on Election Day scattered in different places throughout the country, but we're obviously going to focus on places like Ohio or Florida or Colorado where in a very close election, those electoral votes could matter for the outcome of the presidency.
Let's talk about the controversy surrounding ACORN, the group that was mentioned in that report, the Association of Community Organizations for Reform. Now, if you can take the partisanship out of that and help us understand what's the problem alleged to be.
Well, the way that this country works, unlike many other mature democracies, is that we don't have the government in the business of doing voter registration. We have private third parties going out and doing it. And so ACORN has been very successful. I think the figure's around 1.3 million registrations they've turned in. And it turns out that some of those registration forms are either fraudulent or contain incorrect information or duplicate information. And so there's a question as to what's going to happen with those forms, and there's a concern that some of those forms will lead to actual election fraud on Election Day. Turns out, though, that from all of our studies, there's almost no evidence that fraudulent registration leads to actual election fraud on Election Day with people pretending they're Mickey Mouse or Joe Montana and showing up at the polls on Election Day.
So potentially you're saying how big disruption when it comes to counting votes?
Well, you know, in terms of counting votes, I don't think that we're talking about a big disruption. The question is in terms of the bloated voter rolls and what it takes for election officials before Election Day to go through all those cards. And in a lot of states, by law, any cards that a third-party group like Acorn collects, they have to turn in. So each of those cards have to be investigated, and that takes time. And so that's a problem. But it doesn't translate into any kind of concern about the integrity of the actual vote itself on Election Day.
Now, there was a U.S. Supreme Court ruling today that's getting some attention having to do with Ohio and its voter registration list. Help us understand what that's about.
Yeah, we remember Ohio was very close last time between Kerry and Bush, and whoever won Ohio won the outcome. So it's a closely fought contest. There's been a lot of registration, and what the Ohio Republican Party was trying to do was to force the Secretary of State there, who's the chief elections officer, to turn over lists to counties of mismatches between the voter registration database and the motor vehicles database. And reports said that it could have been up to 200,000 mismatches, although lots of those are probably the result of data entry error or different uses of a name like Joe and Joseph or Senior and Junior and those kinds of problems. But those names now do not have to be produced by the Secretary and passed on to the Elections Board.
So what is that? What's the upshot of that? What does that mean?
Well, so the question is what the Ohio Republican Party wanted those names for, and one possibility is they wanted those names to mount voter challenges on Election Day, to have a list of people to be on the lookout for at the polling places on Election Day. And we don't know if that would have happened or not, and there still could be challenges, but we don't have this list from the Secretary of State that could provide the basis for this anymore.
So essentially, we think, though, that's resolved, not expected to be any more legal action brought in Ohio on that issue, the voter registration list?
Yeah, well, on that particular issue, I think we're done, but there's been other litigation. There was an order this morning from the Ohio Supreme Court that the Secretary has to allow observers in to see what's going on in early voting. There's been litigation over missed boxes that needed to be checked on registration forms. There's still other stuff going on. And what's happened since 2000 is election administrations become more partisan, the parties are fighting more over these things, and so generally there's just been a big uptick in litigation since 2000 over these kinds of problems.
Professor Hassan, we've also seen issues raised around college students. How much of an obstacle do college students face around the country? What's the problem potentially there?
Well, you know, you're allowed to vote where you are basically domiciled, where you expect that you're going to be living for the foreseeable future, and so college students do have the right to register and vote in their college towns. But sometimes that gets local resistance, and sometimes there's misinformation. So we saw reports last month of some of the Virginia county election officials giving wrong information, such as saying that if a college student voted in a college town, that the parents of the student wouldn't be able to claim that student as a dependent on income taxes. There's a lot of misinformation out there about when college students can vote and where they can vote.
Bottom line, we're going to hear more about that?
Well, you know, I don't know that that one's going to be a big one on Election Day. You know, the best thing in terms of election administration is if the election just isn't close, because if we look really closely at things, there are still problems. In fact, by some measures, I think we're in worse shape than we were in 2000.
So, again, I mean, you're saying we should brace ourselves for more, to hear much more about this between now and November 4th.
Yeah, I think so, and I think also because the parties are, you know, playing this up. You're hearing a lot from Republicans about voter fraud. You're hearing a lot from Democrats about voter suppression. You know, until we move to a system where we have nonpartisan election officials administering our federal elections on a national scale, it's hard to see how we get out of this cycle where we see this flurry of litigation in the months coming up to Election Day.
Rick Hassan from Loyola Law School in Los Angeles, thanks very much.
Thank you.
On our website, you can learn about Video Your Vote, which is an Election Day experiment we're conducting with YouTube. We're asking people to film their voting experience and document any problems they may encounter. To learn more about that, just go to pbs.org and then scroll down to NewsHour Reports. Next tonight, Fixing New Orleans Public Schools, Year 2. The NewsHour Special Correspondent for Education, John Merrill, has been chronicling those efforts, and tonight, how rookie teachers are faring in the new school year.
Superintendent Paul Vallis is feeling good. He's beginning his second year leading the Recovery School District, the lowest performing schools in New Orleans. At a rally, he praised his teachers for a year of progress.
You did it. You did it. The increase in academic performance across the board, every grade, virtually every subject. And you know, high school test scores don't increase anywhere in the country except in New Orleans. High school teachers, stand up. Take a round of applause.
Although test scores did go up last year, Vallis has his work cut out for him. 80% of students are still below grade level.
This is the great experiment here. We are rebuilding a public school system from the ground up.
In the crowd are veteran teachers and first-time educators from organizations like Teach for America, who are fast-tracked into teaching for a 2-year commitment.
I need the legend. I need the superstar. There is no greater calling than education. No greater calling.
Paul Vallis has already made a lot of changes. Laptop computers for high school students, regular testing, a standardized curriculum, an extended school day and school year. But in truth, the backbone of his plan is new teachers, young, idealistic, but inexperienced graduates of the nation's top colleges. He's really betting the farm that a steady stream of these young people can rebuild the New Orleans public schools.
So right now we're driving to Carver High School in the Upper Ninth Ward. It's one of the lowest income areas of New Orleans.
Daniel Hoffman just graduated from Yale.
I come from the suburbs. Everyone has a backyard, picket line fences, and the sense of having the ability to do anything. Here it's just sort of a totally different place. I think if we want to create a better New Orleans, education is the way to do it.
This is how it's done, guys.
Also new to town is Princeton graduate Jaylon Erman. She's made a home with 3 other first-time teachers.
You can make, it doesn't matter how you eat it, it'll taste the same.
The whole aura of the city is all about change, all about reform. I never really believed that there could be such an energy and excitement for change until I came here.
Tsitsi Mariker is a graduate of the University of Chicago.
For me, it was just a phenomenal opportunity to start fresh and to do something right and to show everyone else that you could fix an educational system.
Welcome back to Day 2.
After 6 weeks of training elsewhere, the Teach for America Corps members arrived in New Orleans for more instruction.
It's this very high-stakes test that if they don't pass it, they're not going to move on. A lot is riding on this.
One clear message: it won't be easy.
They know you're going to fail, and you have to have that idealism to bounce back from the failure and learn from it. I think it's vital for me to succeed. In my ordinary life, if I fail, I'm the only one failing. If I fail in this classroom, all my kids fail. That's what motivates me to succeed.
It's that drive that Superintendent Paul Vallis is counting on.
These young people come with so much energy and so much dynamism, and they're so optimistic. They have such high expectations and high hopes, and I want to seize on that.
After just 8 weeks of training, it's time to teach.
Everyone have a seat. Start working on your worksheet. Everyone familiar with a leader? Raise your hand. Give me a thumbs up if you're familiar with a leader, thumbs down if you're not. I just want to have a sense of where we are. I need everyone to give me either a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I had a lot of trouble keeping kids on task, keeping them focused. I need you to be working on this stuff. You're not gonna get it unless you keep on trying. I gotta be that much more on my game. I gotta get the kids up, moving around. I can't try and do one thing for more than a certain amount of time, or else the kids will not be able to focus.
So good afternoon, class. Good afternoon. You say good afternoon. You respond, good afternoon, all right? Okay, with power, with energy. So good afternoon. Okay, and hopefully eventually I can teach you how to say that in another language so we can spice it up a little from day to day, all right? First, we're going to explore the benefits of a college education. I have a little activity in 30 minutes. into the class, students start looking left or right, and it's obvious that things are getting pretty tiring.
So what happens to average earnings as one's level of education increases? What happens? It increases, right?
I'm going to have to work harder on doing more engaging activities. If I'm going to talk for a bit, I have to balance it with activities where students are also talking amongst themselves.
Good morning. Grab a power up and get started on it. Grab a power up and get started on it. Good morning. And what I want to do now is take about 10 minutes to go over all of the expectations we have. We can't be late to class, so be here before the tardy bell rings, because when the bell rings, the door is shut and we're going to get started. And that's another one of our classroom expectations here, gentlemen, in the back, right? Please, please, please be respectful of each other, of me, and I think part of that is paying attention and looking up here while I'm speaking. One of the reasons why I'm having trouble getting control of my classroom is because this is the first time I've been in front of a large group of students.
Later on, I met with 7 of the new teachers. Would you characterize your first 2 days as successful?
I mean, they weren't easy. They were very difficult. Physically draining, emotionally draining, but I loved it.
I have not had as much success as I'd like to have in the first 2 days. When I talk to them, when I'm in the classroom, I'm thinking, oh my God, what am I doing?
I told my kids today when going over the rules, I don't like being a disciplinarian, but if I have to, I will. And I'm waiting internally in my mind. When can I start being nice? Because I barely smile.
I'm there to help them, but I can't engage them. They don't want to be engaged. I'm beginning to learn that a lot of these so-called problem behaviors will go away as long as they're engaged and interested.
Make sure you put down the facts first, though. Who is
The struggling rookies can take heart from this man, Harvard graduate Coleston Morgan.
Everybody knows who this guy is. George Bush. Who is he?
President Barack.
Hold on. You said he's not our president. Barack's our president. Is Barack the president?
Beginning his second year in Teach for America, Morgan says experience, momentum, and a connection with students seem to be paying off.
I passed the sort of testing phase where you have to sort of build relationships with the students. I think they know what I'm in here for, and that I'm here for them.
But even with his success, Morgan is skeptical of Alice's reliance on inexperienced teachers.
I don't think the answer is constantly bringing in 22-year-olds who are sort of starting at the very beginning of the learning curve. And unfortunately, too many of us, by the time we actually get it right, are on our way back out the door to something else.
Morgan's criticism is shared by others in the education field. The rap against Teach for America is that you guys can spend 2 years and put it on your resume and go to some fancy law school.
I've heard it called Teach for a while instead of Teach for America. Even if it is 2 years, we're still, at our age, I think we're doing the most we can to affect the most lives. This is what I'm here for. Like, I don't need to go home to a family. For these 2 years, these kids are all that I'm focused on.
Their boss believes that this dedication is bound to pay off.
I expect double-digit growth this year. And I'll go out on a limb now and say that I expect big gains both in overall test scores and in graduation rates. I expect it. Hopefully it'll be double digits starting with a 2 or a 3.
Paul Vallis has a lot riding on the results. With this likely to be his last year in New Orleans, they will be an important measure of his success.
Finally tonight, essayist Richard Rodriguez on the American Dream.
For more than 6 decades, we Americans imagined ourselves to be free of class envy. Other countries might be bound by caste or by class. Our vanity in post-war America was to assume that the world envied us, envied our social mobility and our optimism. In a country that afforded so much opportunity, why should we envy the rich? We regarded wealth with admiration. We gazed from the road at the great houses of Greenwich or Beverly Hills. The symbols of wealth reassured us. Someday we too might be rich. or our children might. There was wealth enough to go around. The financial crisis in the last few weeks, the collapse of banks and mortgage houses and insurance companies, has changed the way Americans speak about money and social class. Economists point out that Americans have grown careless with money. There are even some of us who bought houses with no money down. They bought on credit and they bought on faith. That characteristic American faith that there will be money in the future to pay for what we can't afford today. No sooner had Americans noticed that entire neighborhoods of new houses were in foreclosure than we learned that lenders had sold mortgages to banks that bundled them up and resold them. The 3-bedroom, 2-car American dream was digitized into billions of intangible zeros, of profit and then loss. Secretary of the Treasury Henry Paulson came up with what he hoped would be a fix.
What we are working on now is an approach to...
The fix, too, resembled a bubble machine, a series of zeros, $700 billion. Middle-class Americans whose dream of the future had long been inspired by the success of the rich found themselves in the position of having to bail out the rich.
Looks like we're going to have to bite the bullet.
Secretary Paulson's plan had initially been called a bailout, but when taxpayers objected to the concept, Congress and the White House changed the term to rescue plan. Not that we were bailing out the wealthy, but that we were rescuing the economy.
The people who will feel the pain are not the top bankers and the top corporate executives, but average Americans.
But whether it was a bailout or a rescue plan, there were demands from middle-class Americans. We call ourselves taxpayers when we are angry. Demands to cut the strings of the golden parachutes, the lavish bonuses that corporate officers give their own kind, regardless of performance.
Last month, the taxpayers bought out AIG in an $85 billion bailout. This was a direct result of the mistakes made by Mr. Cassano. Yet even today, he remains on the company payroll, receiving $1 million a month.
This was built about 27 years ago.
Overnight, we began to speak of two Americas of separate purpose. We began to speak of lenders as predators, which made borrowers victims. Overnight, we began to distinguish Wall Street from Main Street. In fact, what we soon discovered was that when a bank fails in America, another bank fails in England, and then the druggist in Omaha can't meet his payroll. But that's economics. And what I'm talking about here is our dream life. The American dream has been devalued in the last few turbulent weeks.
Within the year, 3 million Americans are ex-wage earners.
Not since the 1930s have we heard bankers and CEOs described by politicians, left and right, by middle-class and working-class voices as greedy. The measure of how much has changed is the way we speak now. We have veered into a moral vocabulary to express a class tension. The symbols of great wealth that we used to admire, the purring limousine, the mansion in Greenwich with its own ice rink, the polished yacht, have been reappraised as symbols of greed. Just so, the middle-class use of the word greed has brought us to envy, class envy, of the sort from which we thought, as Americans, we were immune. I'm Richard Rodriguez.
Again, the major developments of this day. Wall Street finished a furious week of highs and lows with more losses, but for the week, the Dow Jones Industrial Average actually gained more than 4.5%. And in the presidential race, Democrat Barack Obama charged Republican John McCain would cut Medicare. McCain's campaign said Obama was lying. Washington Week can be seen later this evening on most PBS stations. We'll see you online and again here Monday evening. Have a nice weekend. I'm Jim Lara. Thank you and good night.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lara is provided by...
With soaring energy prices and global climate change, there are good reasons for believing in wind. Wind energy is clean and plentiful, and it answers the call for sustainable ways to create the electricity we need.
We know because our sole focus is developing technology that uses the energy of the wind to generate electricity. America has some of the world's most abundant wind resources, and Vestas is here to help harness them. Pacific Life. Chevron. Grant Thornton. The Atlantic Philanthropies. And with the ongoing support of these institutions and foundations. And
This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
And fiber help your body regulate digestive health naturally. Compare Yo Plus to Activia. Both have special digestive health cultures, but only Yo Plus has fiber plus vitamin A plus vitamin D. And Yo Plus tastes great. Get more with a Yo Plus coupon at yoplus.com.
I'm Rick Dancer. As a journalist, I've always been objective and fair. My job was to investigate the facts and bring the truth to the people. That's the same job I'll have if you elect me Oregon Secretary of State, overseeing elections and auditing state agencies. I'll work to make the office of Secretary of State nonpartisan. I'll fight to protect your right to a secret ballot. I'll stop the commingling of political funds, and I'll make sure only legal citizens vote in our elections. That's why I'm running for Secretary of State, and that's why I'm asking for your vote.
Pacific Office Automation, the West's #1 office technology dealer. Over 30 years of award-winning sales, service, and customer support, featuring the most respected names in state-of-the-art office technology. Whether your company is small or large, Pacific Office Automation is the name to trust for all your document imaging needs. Locally owned, nationally recognized, the one name to remember, Pacific Office Automation.
Rhonda in the morning, Rod at night. K2 Storm Tracker weather.